Marketing your event can feel like a whole event in and of itself. And today I'm excited to have Kristina Bartold on the podcast to talk to us all about event marketing. But before we get into that, I got to give a shout out to our sponsor, Riverside. Riverside is the all-in-one recording studio I use to record this here podcast. And my favorite part is a little magic they do behind the scenes. It's called Magic Clips. You record your podcast episode, and then the little AI robot guy behind the scenes takes clips of the episode for you. So when y'all see those clips I post on social media, yeah, that's AI, and it truly is magical. So check it out for yourself. Click the link in the show notes today and get 15% off your Riverside subscription by using the code DREA, that's DREA, at checkout. With that, Kristina, welcome to the show.
Drea, it's a dream to be here. I'm so excited. So thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you because I'm just coming off of the high that was High Vibe Women, your signature event that you hosted this past weekend in Kitchener, Ontario. And it was just absolutely fabulous. So I want to start the conversation with the catalyst, the inspiration for getting into the event space, because you come from a marketing and social media background. So why events? What started that line of business for you?
Yeah. So similarly to you, Drea, I loved my marketing agency. So we've been in business almost 4 years. We do done for you social media and podcasting. We have 80 clients, like love, 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 no need for a side project. But something I had noticed was a lot of the entrepreneurs who I knew and who we got to serve said entrepreneurship was lonely. And they talked a lot about how they didn't have great entrepreneur friends. They didn't have people to bounce ideas off of. Maybe there was a lot of gatekeeping in their industry. And so I was really lucky that early on I was investing in a lot of really great American rooms and was going over to the States and going to some amazing events over there and just couldn't find anything comparable at home. So we started throwing these little dinners. There'd be like 10, 15, 20 entrepreneurial women. We always joke that our first one, we made $7. And then we realized we never even counted the gas that it took us to get there. So we're calling that one still in the green. But we would go and we would get together and we had kind of a little bit of a format of the discussion. And people would leave with these amazing connections. Businesses were formed, like relationships, client relationships were made. And we realized we were kind of onto something. So we started to run a little bit bigger events, 30, 40 people. And then last January, we ran our first 100-person event. This past weekend, we had 140 women. In March, we're gearing towards a 200-person event, but really focused around like how to help entrepreneurial women build community and, better their business. We know that business is not really meant to be done alone. Our businesses are stronger, better, I think more profitable when we can do them with others. And so really just kind of leaning into that has kind of how we got started.
Yes. And I could tell being in the room, the intentionality behind the connection piece, because it really did feel like we were all on the same team, right? Like, even though there were other even marketers in the room, other agencies, like everyone was there to kind of lift each other up. And I think that is some of the value of live events. And I'm seeing that especially like in this post-pandemic world, we want to be together in the same place. But what do you think is like one of the biggest takeaways of these live events outside of the connections that are made in the room?
So a few things I think come to mind when you ask that. Like obviously the connections are the best part, but I would say one is drawing inspiration for your business. Like I think that is a huge one. So whether it be like I have been so shocked by sometimes sitting next to someone at dinner who I think like in air quotes, I'm going to say like might not provide value to my business, right? Like you sit next to someone and they're a lawyer and you're kind of like, oh, like, well, actually lawyers are really going to pour into your business, but like how, someone who maybe might be not be adjacent to your business. And you might not think, oh, like, that's going to be a really fruitful connection, but you have no idea what that person's experienced or what they know or what they've tried, whether that be an amazing marketing idea, maybe it might be a connection that they have. There's lots of really good opportunities there. And so I think like the connections are great for the inspiration for your business. And I also think listening to some of the speakers is so powerful because it allows you to borrow belief from them as well, right? So we had a panel, a 7-figure founder panel. And people, I can't tell you how much good feedback we got about the 7-figure panel. And I was on the fence about doing it because not everyone's very comfortable always talking about their numbers. And I didn't want people to feel like they had to, like maybe people don't want to scale to 7 figures. Maybe that's not an aspiration of theirs. But it was really cool to listen to people be like, oh yeah, that's going to be me one day. Like, I can't wait to sit on that panel. I can't wait to be part of that and really borrow belief from each other. So I think apart from the relationships, I think that inspiration is what keeps us going and keeps us really excited for, changes that come in our business. And that's really helpful when, your business isn't in an up season, right? You need that inspiration and that joy.
Yeah, it's so intangible too. Like the dynamic of like, I love that you said borrowing belief from people, because we do need that as business owners, especially those of us who work by ourselves for ourselves. It can be very isolating. And so to have that camaraderie is so important. Okay, so let's talk about event marketing. When we sit down, start planning out our events, how do we design an event that makes people excited to attend? What are some of the things you think about when you're planning your next event?
Yeah. So in terms of when we're actually doing the actual planning, I think the thing that we have noticed the most is actually, and it's funny because I think this is actually counterintuitive, is people think that speakers are what people come for. And we've always been so like blessed by our speakers. Drea, you spoke, you were fabulous. We had some amazing speakers, but I actually think people come more for each other. And so really when we start to think about our experience, we start to think about like, what can we do to foster connection with each other? We think about what kind of things we'd want people to be talking about. What we think backwards a little bit, like what would we want people to describe our event as? And then we start to fill in the programming. Do we want people to feel like there was tons and tons of information? Do we want people to feel like there were lots of opportunities for connection? Do we want people to feel like, there were a lot of photo ops? Do we want people to think that there was, like a lot of great snacks? Like whatever those things are. And we kind of plan from that point. And so I think that that's kind of what's made this at least successful to this point, has been there's been a lot of intentionality around the feedback that we take from people of what people like and what people don't like. And we really use that to help, build hype around what we're doing. And so I actually, from a marketing perspective, luckily being a marketer, like I'm able to like actually use the words that people say about our event in the marketing. Like when I hear people say like, I love meeting new people. I'm really here for the people at my table were amazing. Okay, the next time I'm gonna actually let people talk more at their tables. Like when I hear that people are like, hey, I actually didn't really care that much about the snack break, but I really would have loved more movement. Okay, great. How do we implement more of that stuff? So I think when thinking about building an event, really just listening to what people have to say about your event is helpful, not only on the marketing side, but then also in the design perspective. And we always too, when it came to social, I can't say enough that when you're planning an event, like invest in the video, invest in the photography, invest in the content creator. We had like at one point there was our like videographer was standing, and then I saw our photographer was standing in front of her, and then crouched down was a girl with an iPhone, and I was like, that is the way it's supposed to be, people. We need this content because people want to feel part of something. They want to feel part of that emotion. So that's why our first reel that we always post after event, there's lots of people in it, because we want people to look for themselves and see themselves in there. So I think really focusing on your people makes such a big difference.
Yeah, 100%. Like show them what it is instead of describing it. And I do want to talk more about your marketing, because I think that the challenge with events is that sometimes as the event planners, I work with a lot of event planners, they want to just go, it's here, sign up.
Yes.
And like, we want people to just go, oh yeah, I'm in. But there's a strategy behind just like, come to our event, please, begging, come to our event. So talk to me about the marketing strategy, like leading up to the event. What are some of the things that you're making sure to put in there to sell out the event?
Yeah. So we were really blessed with this past event that we sold out that event in 10 days. So we were really like lucky, and before we'd even really announced speakers. So we were like getting close to, like we were still announcing speakers and the events had sold out. And I was like, sorry, speakers, your friends can't come. Like it was actually getting like, getting a little tight in there, as you saw. But one of the things I think that we did well with that was we learned a lot from the first time we ran our 100% event, where we didn't sell out. And why I think there was that difference there is, one, I think proof of concept is very important. I think when you are selling an event for the first time, go easy on yourself. Like it's so easy when you see other people. I have friends who run large scale 1,000-person events, and it's so easy to compare yourself and be like, oh, people just don't want what I'm offering. Like people aren't looking for that. But if you provide one really good experience, the second is easy for you to put on as well. It's just, you just need that practice. It's like putting in your reps with anything else. So I think that's the first thing. The second is we did really focus on a lot of like FOMO creation in terms of content. I hate saying that because it sounds like non-inclusive, that I'm trying to like create FOMO for people, but we really wanted to show people like what they were missing out on if they hadn't been there, the relationships, and because we use so much content of the actual participants, it was so cool to see them like be like, oh my gosh, this was the best weekend ever. And then people are seeing their friends comment, right? And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, that's the trust. And I think we know this as marketers ourselves, like we can say whatever until we're blue in the face, but that's nothing compared to someone else's like trusted friend or source saying it. I think about like anything I ever buy, I'm like, oh, I got hit by an ad for this, but Drea, if you tell me to buy it, I'm definitely going to buy it, right? So we really like, we have a lot of trust in our people. So how do you actually get a lot of your ambassadors ready? And that's something that we did really well the second time was we were very honest with like, you know, our friends and our entrepreneurial friends who were going to be there, like, hey, like it's our goal to sell out this event and the tickets are going to go on sale on this day. And here are the assets. And we made it easy for people to promote. Like we didn't say like, oh, we have this event that's coming out on this date. Like, you know, can you talk about it? It was like, hey, here's an email you can send. Here are photos, like making it very, very simple for people. And there's also a rule too. And like I think that this is something that we see with all forms of marketing, but event marketing too, is the more that people see something, the more it resonates for them, right? So when people see something over and over again and they're like, oh, Drea went to that event. Oh, Kristina went to that event. Oh, like this person went to that event. Then they start to kind of build a narrative around what it is for good or for bad. And so I think really, again, building that hype and asking people to share and be part of the messaging and the sharing of it, I think was kind of one of the keys that we had in building it out.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that you talked about the ambassadors too, because there is a power in community. And I think when you're talking about event, it literally is a community in and of itself, right? And
Yeah.
so having the ambassadors is a great amplification. It's like showing what that community is like. I'm so guilty of this. When I go to events, I'm always like, well, who's going to be there? Who's going to be in the
100%.
room, right?
100%.
And so that's what your ambassadors are doing. Yeah.
And you know what? It's so interesting because I've been that person too, where even though there was an event recently in New York City I went to, and there was 75 people going, and my friend was running the event. She's like, "You should come." I was like, "Yeah, I'm definitely gonna come," and I didn't buy my ticket. And I was like, "Oh, like who's gonna be there? Like who's in the room? Like who am I gonna sit beside? Like what's the situation?" Even though I was pretty bought in. And so I think it's the same for anything that we do. Is like no one wants to be the first to do anything. So that's why social proof is really important. And whenever I tell anybody who's, you know, selling an event, something that we do that is so little that makes such a big difference is we will take screenshots of like receipts of people buying, like with no personal information, no like Drea Jones is buying a ticket, but you know, and we'll say, oh look, there's, you know, 25 people who've purchased. And I can tell you how many times where I've been like, oh, you know, get your tickets. Like we've you know, we're at 60% sold out. We're at 80% sold out. Those numbers that sit with people, they create urgency. And so something I see with a lot of people is they don't create any urgency in their marketing plan for selling events. And so then they're like, why aren't people buying tickets? Why aren't people buying tickets? And then it's 2 days until the last day. And they're like, oh, 10, 20 people bought a ticket because they were waiting. So what can you do to actually spark some excitement and some urgency in folks so that they make a quicker choice?
Okay, I want to talk more about urgency
Yeah.
because I think it can be challenging depending on the timeline of the events. So when we're thinking about urgency, you know, sometimes when I work with event planners, it's like raising the price of the tickets over time. It can be things like speaker announcements, booking rooms, you know, refund deadlines. What are some of your favorite ways to deploy urgency in marketing, especially when it comes to event marketing?
So one of the things I will say I'm very passionate about is being honest about things. So like I think people sometimes create fake urgency. And like I've seen this before. I've gone to events actually before where they're like, it's 90% sold out. And I'm like, this was a 1,000 person here event and there's 65 people here. Like there was no 80% sold out. Right. And so that's a faux pas and people don't like that and people won't buy an event or a ticket twice. Right. But I think for when I think about creating urgency, it's really around one, I love the pricing structure of it. So something that I'm really also passionate about, maybe this is a hot take, but I don't like the like yo-yo on the pricing. So where it's like, you know, you go, it's $4.99 and then it goes up to $5.99 and then it's $2.99 and then it's back up to $5.99 because the people who bought at regular price are not happy about that. And for me, it's really important about kind of creating that experience for people. And this is something that we learned a bit the hard way, right? Where we would be like, oh, you know, even this past weekend, we gave a code and a bunch of people didn't use the code. And they're like, can you refund me the money for the code? And it creates kind of a logistical nightmare. So really, like, I think that early bird is really important and being really strategic with that early bird of, okay, I'm going to give it a week. maybe you do and think about like what is perceived value for people. So maybe it's, $100, $200 off, but it also could be like, could it include a breakfast? Like, could you add an extra something in a swag bag? We had our friend Jordy who does IVs. Like, could a B12 shot be included? Like, can you do something like that that's creative and adds value that maybe doesn't hit the cost too hard? Then I would say as you're getting closer, I would just think about bonuses in different ways. One of my mentors, what they would do if they were ever in a pickle on people, is they would offer like a hotel bonus. That would be like, get 4 people to buy a ticket and we'll cover your hotel room for the night. Like, thinking about different ways that, is of respect still to the people who bought the tickets, but also can get creative if you need people kind of in the doors. But hopefully the thing I will say too, Drea, in running an event, we didn't start with a 200 person event. And so I think when you're running an event, like knowing kind of what your audience size is and like what people would buy is really important. So you don't have to like depend on urgency. Because I think that that's something I've seen people make mistakes on, where they're like, I'm going to run a 1,000 person event, but they don't have the 1,000 people who are going to purchase an event. And maybe at that price point. And so even things like that, keeping those things in mind. And that's why market research is really important. But I would say for urgency, the big stuff is really just like on the front end. I think like, what can you do to like create that kind of instant buy?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love this conversation. And one of the things that stuck out to me too, well, what you said is building trust with the urgency so that there's higher potential for them to come to the next event, right? It's like looking beyond just this isolated event and going, this is a long-term strategy. And that's what I really loved about your event as well, is the amount of people afterwards who messaged me and they were like, this was amazing. Will you be at the next one?
Yeah.
And then also the people who messaged me was like, man, I missed this one. I need to go to the next one. Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think your people are so loyal to your community? What are the moves that you're making so that the next one sells out just as much as this one does?
Mm-hmm. Well, firstly, I'm honored to hear that, because honestly, like I don't take that for granted at all, that people are interested in coming to these events. Like me and Maria always joke around every time we book a venue, and our next one's larger and was quite a hefty deposit when we put it down. We were like, oh, hopefully it's not just me, you, and the stage, up here. So every time someone buys a ticket, we're like, another one. So the first thing I will say is I'm in a very privileged position in the fact that there isn't a lot going on where I live. And so that is something to keep in mind with folks. Like, I have a friend who lives in New York City, and she was like, how do you get your events to sell out so fast? I'm like, you could do something different every minute in New York. I live just outside of Toronto, about an hour out. And there isn't a huge entrepreneurial scene here, and or it is, and I'm unaware of it. I don't know. I always say, if someone knows it, please invite me to it. I'd love to come. But so I think that's one piece that's really working for us, is that, we're kind of going first in a lot of ways and kind of really just like kind of building, which is great. I think what keeps people coming back, which we have a really high return rate for events. Like, it's very rare we see somebody only one time. So whether that be the small to the big, I think really a big piece of it is Maria and I's energy around the event. And I think the leadership that people show in events is so important. Like, I take time to try to like meet everybody. We go with like, I'm great with names, which is a gift, but like really try to remember things about people's businesses, really try to make those connections. And I think that in itself creates a ripple effect. I have a mentor that I love, and I go to a lot of their events, and they're the same. Like, they'll meet somebody, and it's like, I'm like, oh, there's no way they remember that person. And they're like, so sorry, I don't remember you. What kind of business do you have again? Oh, I have a great connection for you. Like, really just like that generosity goes a long way. And then people start to do that with each other. And I think the nice thing about these events, Drea, is that once people start coming, it's really not about us at all. They're not coming for me and Maria. They're coming for each other. Like, it's like you go back to camp every summer. You don't really go for the counselors. You're going like for your friends. And that's kind of what the vibe has become, where, they're like, oh, I'll see you at the next high vibe women thing. I'm so excited to see you. Like, and Maria and I are just kind of like the minions organizing it over here. And so I think that's it. And I think around the piece about selling out, I'll be vulnerable in telling you that moving this to a 200 person event at a hotel, like, has a different feel for it, for sure. And different level of investment on our end, and like really a lot of things. But I think what we were so passionate about was just actually like we could have fit more people in, but the round tables were really important to us. Like
Yeah.
we wanted people to have seats where they could sit with lots of people and they could get to know a table rather than just like one or two other people. There were little things that we kept, like, having an accessible stage is really important to us. Like little things like that really keep us at the forefront, I think, are what make our events. And so it's really easy, I think, when you're thinking about like, how am I going to sell at this event? Like, do I, do a sale? Like, do we like, do I send a message to every single person I know? And like, but I'm actually noticing that our people are actually selling the event in a lot of ways for us. And like, we're seeing people posting on Instagram being like, hey, High Vibe Women, like they're 60% sold out of their VIP tickets. Like if you want one, grab one. Like, and we're not even saying it, which is awesome. So, yeah, long-winded, but I would say like really it's keeping it to the core of the energy of like what you want to bring to the event. And I think also like really using that community and your network to be able to help you move it in front of new people.
Yeah. I want to talk more about the energy piece too, because I think that this is hard to capture in marketing, especially for events, especially for the first event, right?
Yeah.
I think subsequent events, you can use the videos from the event. But, for
Mhm.
someone listening who's thinking, okay, I'm going to start my first event and I do want to capture what that energy is like. What kind of advice would you give that person as they're planning their marketing?
Yeah, so I would say if I was doing this all again and I was running my first event and I was trying to get like, a content creator, or I was trying to give advice on what kind of person I wanted, I would say really making it so much less about the people on the stage and making it so much more about the people in the room.
Mm.
And really capturing content of them rather than of you on stage or of your speakers. Even like getting great shots for your speakers is so important, and getting shots of you is important, but really making it about their experience and being quick with it. That's something that actually, like, my friends who own Create and Cultivate in the States, like they actually post, I think this is nuts, and I like in the best way, I've just never been able to actualize this myself, but they post fully edited photos day of. Like we'll be
Wow.
at the event, like right now, a fully edited photo will be posted. And I think that's amazing. And it adds a very high level of professionalism that I personally am not available for. Like I'm a tired woman. I'm like, I'm not gonna be editing these photos, but it's such a cool idea. But I think like what's even better is like, how do you capture the spirit and the energy quickly? So if you're there taking video, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be fully edited, but hiring a content creator to come and make 2 or 3 reels, and then the next day you're posting the reels while people are still so excited about it. I think that makes a big difference. And really, you want to make it so people see themselves in it, so that it's not about you speaking. Like, you probably did a great job speaking, and accolades for you. But really, like, it's about how do you like really capture the spirit of the event and the people in the event. That's going to make the big difference on selling the next one.
Yeah. Yeah. Speed is key too, because I feel like there's something about the psychology behind it as an attendee too. When we
Yeah.
see the stuff happening after the event, we're more likely to like engage with it and share with it because we're still living in the moment. Right. I love that.
Yes.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about success, because this is something you mentioned earlier with your first event being $7, but you didn't count the gas. So I know that for a lot of events, people treat them as marketing assets
Yep.
rather than business. So I'm curious about what you define success to be with your events, monetary, but also outside of that. Like what makes it like, yeah, this was a win for me.
Yeah, 100%. And I was actually going to bring that up earlier, was that it depends on what you think success is in an event and what your ideal is. Like, so a lot of people sell from stage at events, which is very common, where people will sell a program and that they actually don't care about making money on the ticket. It's about, you're doing an upsell and you'll make $500,000 on a program. Like, that's great. That hasn't been our goal. And truthfully, like, not to sound like Mother Teresa over here, but like, really where we came from with this was very like, we're doing this out of like goodness. Like we were like, we just want to bring women together. Like we're not sure if this will ever make money. We don't actually need this to make money because our other business is doing fine, right? So it was really at first about us being like, what would happen if we brought women together? And we were using it as marketing. It was not uncommon for us to run one of these events and then get a client out of it, which is what we know to be true when we go to events in the US, right? Like that's how our business scaled so fast. And so I loved that. But at the same time, as more and more effort went in, we actually had to start being honest about the fact that we were like, oh, we've created a second business. and, we're running events that are costing upwards of $100,000, we probably should be trying to make some money. Like, we should probably try to figure this out. And that's where things like sponsorship come in, and all of that. So would I say I'm super clear on the metrics of what success looks like to us? Because Maria and I are very touchy-feely. So we're both kind of like, but did you see the impact? And did you see these people connecting with each other? And that person found their business bestie. And did you see them collaborating? Like, they were on a podcast together. How cute. Like, we are in that energy. But for us, really trying to increase the profit margins of these events has been big, and not doing it at the expense of the tickets for the people coming. We haven't tried to make these like, super expensive tickets. We want this to still be very accessible. But the other thing that's been really successful, or like a metric of success for us, has been about partnerships. And this is something that I think is really underrated that people do not do when it comes to events. There's people who do it and they do it so well, and then there's people who don't do it at all. And I'm somewhere in the middle, I think, but where people are really connecting with brands and organizations, businesses, even solopreneurs who want to get in front of the audience that you're running an event for, and finding ways to amplify them. And whether that be through a social media partnership, whether that be partnership day of, and really trying to move the needle there. And that's actually been an area where we found success, and that's made these events a lot more profitable, because it's been easier for us to find these people who, are going to serve these women. That's always what we always say when we go into partnership. It has to be win-win, and they have to serve these women. It's not a, hey, come and pitch on stage for 20 minutes. But really, like, I think those partnerships go such a long way, and can really grow the impact of an event.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think the same thing with you mentioned earlier, you're like touchy feely. I'm the same way when I run the events of like, who cares about the numbers? Two of my attendees are now doing a podcast together because they happen to sit next to each other at the VIP dinner. You know what I mean? Like, I'm always like, oh my gosh, this is like what I dream of. And also, like, we have to make sure we're not doing it at the sacrifice of our business. So I love that you've identified that partnerships is that way for you. Okay, so I want to talk about challenges, especially with marketing and community building, because they go so hand in hand, especially when you're event planning. The marketing of the event all comes from the vibes in the room.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have those moments where we're like, oh no, the vibe's off, it's not working. Or just in marketing, we're like, oh, this thing was supposed to happen. Or what are some of the oh no moments in your community building or marketing, and how did you turn them around?
So I would say I am generally pretty optimistic as a person, which is like both my crux and my joy, is that like I kind of see the good in most things. But I would say early on, like, where something that we really struggled with the marketing of community, and I don't know, Dre, if this is where you're going with this question, but I will share this and be vulnerable for a sec, is that like when you are building a community of entrepreneurial women, lots of women, it's very hard to like uphold boundaries sometimes around some of this marketing as well. And people expect you to like share everything that they post because they've invested with you, or and that's something we kind of got into really early, where people would be like, I have this launch, like, would you mind sharing it? And like, would you mind doing this? And I'm like such a big believer, even with my own clients. I said this on stage on Saturday, that like, we work with a luxury rug client. Anytime I can think of anyone who needs a rug, I'm like, you need to work with this man. Like, that is how my brain works. I love to support my people. But it also, we had to set kind of like some precedents around, what that felt like. And that doesn't feel good in community. Like, when you're in community with other people, it doesn't feel good to be like, no, sorry, I'm not going to reshare that post, because if I reshare your post, I have to reshare everybody's post every time they have a launch. So that was a really hard thing that we kind of came across. And we actually got some pushback on it, where people were kind of like, we thought you support women. And we were like, we do really support women, but like, we also need to not do this 24/7, like, where, like, maybe we need to create a system, or maybe we, like, maybe we need to charge and create better assets for people. Like, it was like, it started a bit of a spiral for us. And so I think for me, that was one of the big things with marketing, community building, where we had to really start to actually push back and be like, okay, what's important to us? What's important to the brand long term? How do we add the most value to people? What's going to feel the most fair? And that's like not the space I like to live in. Like, the space I like to live in is like, let me repost this and then also do a story and then also buy the program myself. Like, that's like where I live. I think you too, probably, Drea. And then the other thing I would say too is that one of the things that like I've been really struck with more lately is like, when things don't go perfectly at your events, like, not owning it. And I think the more that your events grow, like whether it be small or to large or whatever, whether that be and like from a marketing perspective where you're like, oh, I thought this would sell more tickets, or it's like, something happens at the event, it's not perfect, or whatever. Like these events can't be reflections of like who we are as humans. And so really just like taking that step back and being like, okay, like what's going well? Like what do I have to be proud of here? And what can we change for the future? But like what do I have to be proud of? And how do I continue to move the needle that way?
Yeah, not owning the things that go wrong. I feel like that I needed to hear that personally because it is challenging as the organizer, as the marketer, as the community like space holding person to like feel responsible for everything and everyone's emotions. And I want to share everyone equally and not like, do one thing more for another person. So yeah, I think this is just part of, being a leader and being very publicly a leader in this space. One of the things that I also really love about the way your events bring community together is that it feels very natural. And I've been at events where it kind of feels a little maybe orchestrated, like overly done. And so I think that part of that does come from the marketing of it, attracting the right people. So what are some of the things that you do as signals for your community to make it feel natural that they're like, yes, I need to be in this room?
I think a lot of the pieces around the marketing aspect of it is around the language that we use. Like we're very, very key about like, high vibe is one of these words that could literally mean anything. Like it's very vague. Actually, somebody asked me recently, they're like, is this like a marijuana community? I'm like, no, no, but thank you so much for telling me this, that someone else might think this. Thank you. And so it's funny. I was like, if you want it to be, it can be, but it's up to you, really. But really for us, it's really, we talk a lot about community. We talk a lot about collaboration over competition. We talk a lot about everything you need is in the room or one step away. Like we talk about relationship. We talk about the follow-up, like fortune in the follow-up. Like those are things that you will hear every time you come to one of our events. You're seated next to the person you're meant to sit next with. Like we, in our smaller events, we choose everyone's seat and intentionally, and people will be like, oh, I really came with my friend, and I'm like, nope, not today. You didn't. You came alone, and you're gonna meet this person. And then afterwards, always without fail, thank you so much, this was so helpful, I got to know someone different. We give them the tools to have the conversations. We set people up. Something that we do in our smaller events, which is why a lot of the women tend to know each other, is we have every single person go up and say who they are, how they help people, and something they need. And it's amazing how many people are like, I need a web designer. Someone's like, me. Another person's like, I help people like unblock money trauma. Someone's like, I didn't even know I had money trauma, but thank you for like bringing that to my attention. Like, let's do it. Right. So it really, I think we do a lot of those efforts in our smaller events. So the bigger events feel more homey because these people all already know each other. And I think a lot of it comes from the way that Maria and I want to show up, which is like, we want to be like, we're always like, we were laughing, a bunch of the high vibe women, like they did something together, and Maria and I were like, where was our invitation? But it was fine. I felt like the teacher of a school, but it was just like a reminder to me that it wasn't about us, right? And that it's about the connection and the community. And so I think the signals that we give people is that this is a very community oriented space, that like anyone's welcome. And I think another thing that we really prioritize when we're taking video, and that when we're inviting people, when we're choosing speakers, is like diversity. And like whether it be ethnicity, whether it be age, whether it like all different types of women. We've had women come who are 75 getting started, and we've had people who are new grads come and join us. Like, and those two women will sit together and they will plot world domination. And that's the beauty. So I think really just showing people like what our expectations are. I think people tend to fall in line. And I'll be honest, sometimes people come and they don't have a good time, right? And I have to release that of, I want everybody to like love everything that I do. I'm an only child, so my parents love everything I do. And so I'm like, oh, you must love this. But recognizing like not everything's for everybody. And maybe that's not a fit for them. And I'd love for them to find the space that is the right fit. It might not be with me, but I know I'm still doing good stuff even if it's not for everyone.
Yeah. Oh, so much goodness there. And I feel like there's like everything you said is the magic sauce behind building a community that truly is energetic, right? Like being intentional about the smaller events so that the larger events feel homey, making sure that, people sit next to the right people in the room, whether that's accidentally or intentionally, like all of it is supposed to happen. And I feel like these are all of those signals that we put in our marketing that do attract attract the right people, right? It's like every little detail matters. And all of those details are like chef's kiss, what makes everything flow so nicely together. So I want to end our conversation with the story. So you mentioned that the words that you choose in your marketing are very intentional. And I know that you have a story starter guide for us. So tell me about the starter guide.
Yes. So yeah, our story starter guide. So it's so funny because Drea, I don't talk about events that much on podcasts. So this is this is my debut, my foray. But I would say, our marketing agency, we do a lot of work with folks on helping them tell their stories, right? And actually that helps them be better when they're at events and they're able to kind of meet with people. And so we have an awesome story starter guide that gives you a different story starter for every single day, so that this way, or for 30 days, you don't have to think twice about what you're going to say when you show up on your Instagram stories. And I'm going to tell you, when you practice these things, your elevator pitch comes way easier when you're in person. So yeah, I recommend you guys downloading it.
Awesome. I'll put that link in the show notes, y'all. It's onlinedrea.com/331. Where else can we connect with you online, Kristina?
Well, any friend of Drea's is a friend of mine. So feel free to come on over, shoot me a DM, let me know what you think. I also had Drea on my podcast called Community with Kristina Bartold. It's actually like maybe the 5th most downloaded episode. So Drea's rising the ranks. Let's go to number 1. But we talked all things building a genuine community. So love for you to listen to that. And yeah, come on over and let me know what resonated.
Yes, check that out. I'll put that episode in the show notes, as well as all of Kristina's socials. Stalk her because her socials are fun. Honestly, love it. Thank you so much for being on the show, Kristina. This was great.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. And I'm just so grateful for you.
And thank you, dear listener, for tuning into another episode of the Mindful Marketing Podcast. Make sure you rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can now leave comments on Spotify, which is super fun. Continue the conversation there. It keeps us in the top 100 marketing podcasts, and that's all because of you. Coming up, if you're not in the Mindful Marketing Lab, why not? You got to come on in and join us. We're doing a 2025 planning workshop on November 13th. That's the day after this episode. If you're listening to it live, come on in. We're going to plan out and plot out our marketing for the year. Yeah, 2025 is almost here. Dive on into all the things that we have available in the lab as well. I'd love to see you there. Next episode, I am doing my 2025 predictions episode. This is the 5th one that I've done. If you want me to predict, take out my crystal ball and show you the future of social media, this episode is for you. Stay tuned for that next week. I'll see you then. Bye for now.